All right. I've got my friend Kirsten Flanagan back on the show. It's been a few years. We did a podcast, metabolic flexibility, metabolic efficiency, and fasting a few years ago. And you were in the US. Now you're back home. And we're going to dive into all these topics, how it's evolved to the topics we've been talking about over the years. So thanks for joining me in a great conversation to continue how you can train, feel, and perform your best as an endurance athlete, comma, aging athlete, comma, the female athlete. So welcome to share your story and your journey and your studies you've been working on.
Thanks, Debbie. It's really cool to be talking to you again. I think it was 3 years ago, so it's been quite a while. But yeah, so I was in the US, as you know, and came back just before the whole COVID situation happened, and actually ended up on the last flight home from America back to South Africa, which was quite lucky. But yeah, since then I've just been settling down at home, like getting used to the working from home situation, and started with Tailor Blend, a personalized supplement company. That's what I'm working with at the moment. And yeah, I'm just really enjoying that. Would love to talk a little bit about that as well, and how we can use that to support our overall nutrition. But that's basically what I'm doing at the moment, working from home in Cape Town, and have some plans to be traveling again soon. So hopefully I'll see you in San Diego.
Yeah. Always welcome. So I was thinking of this. I just mentioned before we pushed record, but I remember I was getting my car oil lube change or something. We're on the phone, and where I used to live in Bellevue, Washington, Seattle, and we were talking back and forth a lot about fasting too much for female athletes. And this was 3+ years ago. And both you and I, you were working Sean Wells at the time, and we're both like, okay, shouldn't this be a little different for female athletes? And are we doing too much? Like I always say on the show, doing not eating until afternoon, and I'd be doing 2 workouts and moving all day because I had training clients and running with clients and doing my own workouts, and how we can have what's kind of what's called, I think, energy flex now, having too much energy output, not enough energy input, and having this negative effect on our hormones and going into kisspeptin. But what have you found over the years since you started working on that fasting for women when you were working with Sean Wells? What's changed or what you've learned?
Yeah, it was a big topic that we focused on, specifically women and keto. So obviously Sean Wells is very big on the keto diet and has been following it for many years. But he was one of the unique individuals to recognize that women were very different to men. So while talking about keto and the benefits and how helpful it is for our overall health and well-being, or it can be, he did acknowledge that it can be quite stressful, and it is a stress on the body. And when it comes to women, they respond a little bit differently to how men might respond. And obviously, all of the studies that we base all of the ketogenic diet like research off of are done on men mostly. So, like, I'm sure you're aware of Stacey Sims and a few others in the area. They talk about how men or women are not small men, and we do respond differently. So basically, how I like to look at it is we have our stress load, and women tend to have different tolerances to stress. And when it comes to things like that, we try to do a lot of hormesis now. As the trendy thing to do is to have these little bursts of hormetic stresses on our bodies. So this is cold exposure or sauna or exercise or fasting. And we tend to think that more is better. So we do our whole day consists of these things. We're fasting overnight, perhaps doing 16 hours of fasting. We've also gone for our cold swim in the morning. Perhaps we're doing sauna at the end of the day, and we've done our HIIT session at 5 a.m. That's fasted as well. So we stack all these things on top of each other, and at the end of the day, it kind of adds up and puts it overflows our stress bucket, and that overall stress is called our allostatic load. And that allostatic load is what we need to be cognizant of. Is are we getting too much stress in? So a hormetic stressor is by definition a small amount of stress that causes a positive response. But it's, if you're doing all of these on top of each other, it's definitely not a positive response and can do more harm than good. So yeah, and then just the first tell signs of that in a woman is irregular hormone functioning and absence of period. And all these sorts of things are clear signs that sometimes we just like to ignore and see it as a benefit to us, but it's actually more harmful down the line.
Yeah, that's what I think I started learning. And as you did a few years ago, just like, okay, is this really good for me? I'm doing what everyone's telling me to do. And I feel good because if you're fat adapted, you just don't really have appetite. And then we start adding in all these biohacks we hear about, like the hot cold shower and doing the sauna every day, and then doing all, our fasted workouts, like I said, and people doing HIIT training all the time. And then it's just overfilling our stress speaker. And women, I find, are so stressed out, and men too. But I think women, if you have kids and you have a full-time job and you're training, it's even more stress, and we're more sensitive to excess stress. Like my story that I wrote in my book, Life is Not a Race, and my adrenal exhaustion, HP axis dysfunction is, just, I would say less is more. Doing so much in life and having that addiction to busyness causes all this random metabolic chaos in our body. And I think we have to be careful for athletes in general when we're adding so many different types of biohacks that are beneficial, as you're saying, in acute dose. But if they become every day, as Jay Feldman said, and he's saying on his show and sharing that energy metabolism, that are we doing too much? And I think Rob Wolf pointed that out too. Like, is this fasting going to extreme? Because they're not specifically talking to the endurance athlete and the endurance female athlete who's already doing a ton of stuff that's probably stressful on her body, especially if we're doing more than 45 minutes at a time. We're adding that into taking care of kids and making meals and doing chores and go to work and take care of our husband or spouse or whatever. So I think it's just so much. And that less is more philosophy I'm implementing in my life every day as much as I can, because I think I get more bang for the buck if you do the shorter workouts and really listen to your body and change it with your hormone cycle.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think when it comes to the endurance athlete, it's even more of a important topic to talk about, with the amount of load stress that we put on our bodies. But just from a personal story, I've been through this myself, and I have a similar situation to you where I learned from practice. And I was a marathon canoeist, so long distance paddling, and training was quite intense, 6 days a week, twice a day. So I was putting my body under a lot of stress, and I got very into nutrition and started learning about low carbohydrate diets and keto diets and how they were so beneficial for your health. And I wasn't informed enough, and I didn't know all of the science and all the of how it actually worked. And I adopted this nutrition strategy myself, and I ended up doing my first year of doing this. I competed extremely well, because I had obviously become more fat adapted, and being marathon canoeist, you are doing like long endurance exercise, so you do use your fat for fuel, and it was benefiting me. But then in my third year, I realized I just started getting tired, and I couldn't, another year of training for this at that like intensity, I couldn't wrap my head around it, because I just was so tired and fatigued, and I didn't have the energy. So I realized I wasn't eating enough carbohydrates for the fuel for the training that I was doing. So that's something that's really important, is like fueling for the intensity and for the work required. And yeah, I've only realized that after I got a bit tired of it.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we're working towards talking about, metabolic flexibility. And for athletes that are good at burning fat as a main fuel source, and their backup fuel tank is carbohydrates, and we are able to metabolize fats as well as carbohydrates. So we want to be able to break down and use both fuel sources. So, what have you found with your research and work and your own personal experience with being on a strict ketogenic type of diet and then starting to experiment with, oh, maybe I do need some strategically placed carbohydrates and what that might look like for you and timing as we continue to talk on the show about matching your fueling and training, and then for females, matching it with their hormone cycle?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so what I realize is metabolic flexibility is the foundation of nutrition, especially when it comes to an athlete. And I just like to define it to help think about it better. So it's your body's ability to utilize fat for fuel and carbohydrates for fuel and switch between the two depending on its availability as well as the requirements that your body needs at that time. So glucose is burned a lot quicker and provides a quicker source of energy, and fat is burned a little bit slower and provides a slower source of energy. So when your intensity increases, you obviously need energy a lot faster. So you start using more glucose compared to fat. And I'm sure your audience already knows this, but like a lot of people like to think that they're in certain camps, and to be metabolically flexible, you have to be extreme on the one end. So you have to be extremely fat adapted, and that's the only way that you can become metabolically flexible. But I might argue that the opposite is if you're continuously on a ketogenic diet or low carbohydrate diet, and you're not ever allowing your body to utilize its enzymes and the processes to metabolize carbohydrates, your body's not going to be able to do that in the most efficient way that it should be able to. So we often get the people that actually are aware of metabolic flexibility and know how to achieve it and know what the benefits of it, they often the extreme, and they don't they excluding carbohydrates completely and not allowing their bodies to burn carbohydrates. So they're actually driving in the opposite direction towards metabolic inflexibility. So I don't know if you see that in your practice, people who are actually very aware of it and they not practicing it properly.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people are, as I focus my coaching for endurance athletes, how to fuel, train, and perform their best, that it is figuring out breaking the fear. Because I think we're often that type A, triple A driven, ambitious, high performing, high charging athlete that we think, ketogenic diet, I need to stay in nutritional ketosis. People are so strict and they are follow the rules to the T. So they just keep their carbs to 50 grams and they keep just fat adapted and they're being in nutritional ketosis 24/7, that they may start to struggle with fatigue and not able to have higher speed and performance gains when they're doing like a race. And I think looking at all carbs are not evil is what I say from Rob Wolf, that, figure out your carb tolerance, which real source quality type of nature's carbs that work best for you, to add those in, and when to improve performance. If you're doing a high intensity workout or you're doing a race that I'm going to be more anaerobic, and figuring that out. And also I've been doing Endure IQ, Dr. Dan Plu's program, and taking that into account, like the 80-20 and the train low, race high. But yes, to answer your question, I think there's a lot of athletes, because we are so type A, follow the rules, that it's not the rules necessarily for the endurance athlete or female athlete, that we have to really experiment and know that everyone's different. And we need to look at, genetics and ancestry background and microbiome and stressors and everything else.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking of an example. My day was pretty busy. I was driving around and I had a low carb protein shake, and I kind of just was on the run having some avos and sardines for lunch. So it was very low carb, and I gymmed in the morning, some resistance training. And I'm actually wearing a continuous glucose monitor at the moment. So I just saw my blood glucose was very stable and low the whole day. I wasn't stressed or anything, so it just remained quite low, but I didn't have any high carbohydrate meals. So I'm just thinking that if you're doing that 5-10 years in a row, it's your body isn't like getting used to those spikes and knowing how to metabolize them and respond to them properly. So then when you do eventually, then you see these like crazy spikes that don't come back down if it go properly. And that's when people decide, okay, no, carbohydrates are terrible for me. And the truth is that they're actually just not metabolically flexible. So that's just hopping on the same point. But your point with the carbohydrate timing and endurance athletes, I think that's is especially important. And when I speak to a lot of athletes over here, the general thinking, I'm sure you see the same, is carbohydrates fuel endurance performance, and we need to eat a lot of carbohydrates. This is not the people that are low carb athletes who are on the other extreme. But I see a lot of athletes that do Ironman and triathlon, and they think that they can eat whole, like bowls and bowls of oats and cereals in the morning, then have a granola bar as a snack, and fuel their training session with carbohydrate drinks. And it's just an endless amount of carbohydrates. And I think this is where like timing your carbohydrates as an athlete is super important. So if you have, firstly, you should just you should target your carbohydrates around your training sessions. So if you have one session a day, you might want to have carbohydrates the night before so that your glycogen stores are full. If you have that session in the morning, then you can have you'll have enough glycogen stores to be able to fuel that session. So if you have if you're having another session later in the day, you want to replenish your glycogen stores immediately after that, so that you have some fuel on board for that following session, the following session. But if you're an endurance athlete and you're not one of those high performers, and a lot of athletes get into competition or racing to be healthy, right? And to lose weight and so all the benefits that you get from exercise, but they don't see results. They still that fat endurance athlete, and they're not seeing the benefits of exercise. And I think that's where it comes down to carb timing and how much carbohydrates you have in around your sessions. So your higher intensity sessions, you can have some carbohydrates, but the lower intensity sessions, you might not need those carbohydrates on board, but a lot of the time they think that they do, and they're over consuming the carbohydrates. So I think that's where people are a little bit confused.
Yeah, it's really a personalized nutrition fueling a training program. And ideally, if we can do metabolic testing card to figure out, what is the rate that you're burning fat and carbohydrates and what heart rate. So you can really calculate everything out. But in general, I think using a CGM, as I've used NutriSense or, Keto Mojo I've been using lately because I have a bunch of strips, ketones and glucose, and I've been trying Biosense. And it is when I'm finding, what foods and ratio of macronutrients work best for me and carb timing to improve my performance as I focus on trying to get my running speed back because I've lost it. And I've just been struggling for years running, that just not doing these crappy workouts. So I think you need to stop and assess, okay, is what I'm doing working for me? If I'm trying to lose weight, am I doing all this and losing any weight? Because I find a lot of people are still overweight, but they're trying keto and fasted workouts and they're exercising, but they're still struggling with inability to lose weight, fat weight. And then performance gains, if you're not getting faster, all right, well, maybe it's okay to add in some sweet potatoes with some butter with your steak in an early dinner, not eating 3 hours before bed, but having those strategically placed will help the next day's workout. So really breaking it down for each day is almost what you have to do for a weekly cycle and a monthly cycle for athletes.
Right. Yeah. And I think when it comes to the athlete that's wanting to lose weight, the first thing I tell people is increase your protein intake. Mm-hmm. And this is another topic that I know you're very passionate about is prioritizing your proteins. I think there's a misunderstanding in general. People don't think or think that having too much protein is unhealthy, but the reality is those studies don't really show that high amounts of protein are unhealthy. So I think the RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram or something. And I think that's just the the amount you need to not waste away each day, I think, just to survive. So for an athlete, should be getting at least 1.2 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Some people even say, I think Gabrielle Lyon says 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day.
Mhm.
So that's what I like to tell an athlete who's trying to lose weight is if you have enough muscle and lean body mass on you, you will have you'll have a greater glucose sink. So when you eat carbohydrates, all the carbohydrates will be utilized by your muscle mass,
Mhm.
and you'll also be burning more energy. So I think that's something that people they don't prioritize, or endurance athletes don't prioritize protein as a very important macronutrient.
Yeah, for sure. As I know you're on Instagram, and that's where I usually hang out and share Dr. Gabrielle Leon's infographics and share the importance of lifting weights because especially as we age, we female athletes, even more so than men, but our hormones get lower and we have to fight muscle breakdowns. So catabolic versus muscle building. So it's this continuous battle. And to really win that battle of building muscle versus breaking down muscle, we have to work harder, eating more protein and timing in, having the leucine with the essential amino acids post workout to help that protein synthesis. But lifting weights, and I think so many people were endurance athletes, Ironman, trail running. I just spoke with a coaching client that's doing 100Ks, and it's really 45 minutes. I learned years ago is like the high end of your cardio work. After that, we raise cortisol, so cortisol is going to be breaking your muscle down more, a catabolic state. So what it's a solution: eat more protein and spread that throughout the day, which you can't do if you're doing fasted window. The time restricted feeding window is so small. There's no way to get, say, 150 grams of protein in a day and only take 30 to 50 at once and spread that out. So from, doing too much OMAD, I'm really focusing on, okay, I want to get leaner and stronger, and I'm 50 years old. So I have to, my hormones are definitely different. I need more focus on strength training, less chronic cardio, and a lot more focus on protein intake throughout the day and less strict fasting, and time that
Exactly.
in and then play with your carbs.
Yeah, and I think this is where balance is important and playing around with your own diet, because I still believe fasting is beneficial, and I think the only downside I see to 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 mitigate the negative effects of having too much protein all the time. So say you're never fasting, you're having protein intake all the time, and you're continuously stimulating mTOR, that might not be, you're never allowing that autophagy and the cellular breakdown to happen that you want, and is the reason why we do fasting. So to have the balance between fasting and having your protein intake. So I think that's where your overnight fast of 12, 14, 16 hours might come in, allowing your body that time to have the autophagy and the cleansing, and then making sure that you hit your protein target in that eating window. And like you said, just breaking it up into like maybe 40 grams in 3 meals, maybe 2 main meals and a snack, is what I like to do, and getting your protein that way. And this also where protein supplement or shake can come in as well and help. Because often it's just a little bit tricky to get that much protein in your diet from whole foods, but if you can, that's great.
Yeah,
But
it's hard. It's
protein
hard to
shake,
eat that much.
yeah, it is. Yeah, I think, yeah, I just wanted to, a lot of people say that the overstimulation of mTOR is a bit of a scary or the negative side of increasing protein intake, but there's definitely ways to mitigate that by fasting at the same time.
Well, I think it's timing your exercise. So if you're doing a recovery day once a week, that's active recovery, that's a good day to do more of a longer fast, or looking at the female hormone cycle when ideal to fast. If maybe that's like mid to late follicular phase, that you can do some fasting in there that's a little longer. But maybe I find doing a bone broth fast for females is, and male athletes, is sometimes easier way to fit in than not doing just doing a water fast. So timing that on your, okay, this is my recovery day, I'm just going to do mobility and walking and maybe some foam roller work and foundational training, but nothing much. And then just put in a bone broth fast, like have cups of bone broth to feel satiated, or, do a water fast, but have your herbal tea and coffee, but match that to the right time of the month in your training schedule. So do you find working with any kind of extended fasting with athletes or female athletes beneficial?
Yeah, I don't usually recommend fasting for athletes that are training quite intensely.
Yeah.
But I kind of, instead of fasting, I recommend like shifting your diet from low carbohydrate to more carbohydrate heavy, depending on your training requirements. So that's what I would more look at. And then I think that fasting, having some bone broth or having the teas or the creamers and the coffee to get you through that fast on those low intensity days, I think is quite valuable, because you're still having that lower protein intake. You're not stimulating mTOR, and you're allowing your body the time to go into the opposite cycle of the opposite phase of autophagy and cleansing. So you're not switching on that protein metabolism all the time. But yeah, I think when it comes to extended fast, I think if you are that high end endurance athlete, you're not going to be wanting to fast too regularly. Your body has a lot more demands than the average person.
Yeah. So that kind of goes to another question we were touching a little bit, but guidelines for fasted exercise. If you're doing a low heart rate, zone 2 type of maffetone, max aerobic function heart rate, not eating anything, but maybe some, having some fats in your coffee may help just give you enough fuel to keep you in fat burning state, versus if you're doing a morning hit training, or maybe it's in the afternoon that you're doing a speed workout run or something that your heart rate's going to be high, low, or a tempo. How do you find, fueling? Is it, to not eat before workout or to eat is always a question for people if they're doing morning workouts.
Yeah,
And then the
it
carbs.
it is quite a tricky question, and something I've been playing around with myself, and I've started having something like more whole food based carbs before my training sessions in the morning, because I like to train in the morning, and it's usually like a long cycle, or maybe in 45 minutes to an hour long cycle. But for the more intense sessions where it's a interval session, I'm definitely going above 50-60% of my max. I will have usually a little bit of a protein powder and some carbohydrates in it, whether it's a little bit of oats or honey or banana. I've definitely felt that I've can be able to push a lot harder in those high intensity sessions.
Yeah.
But if it's something on the weekend that's like a longer ride that's very low intensity, zone 1, zone 2, then I would rather just do electrolytes and some essential amino acids during that ride.
Not eat anything before or during if you're doing a long ride?
If it's like some of the long rides will be quite hard and they'll go above zone 1 or zone 2, then I'll definitely have something. But if it's on my own and it's very low intensity, like talking conversational pace, then I'll try and do a faster one to get the fat metabolism going as well. But it's just really important for the athlete to not fool themselves and say, no, it's a zone 2 ride, but then you're going zone 3 and zone 4 and you're not fueled, and you're not you're increasing your stress hormones, like you said, or increasing cortisol, and you're probably doing more harm than good by doing that session in that state. So you just got to be honest with yourself, and sometimes a zone 1 or zone 2 session feels like absolutely nothing to you, but if that's a fasted session, it just should be really easy.
Well, that's what I keep saying and questioning for my own performance. Like a long ride, 3 to 4 hours on a Saturday morning, is my performance going to be improved if I have something in that morning? Because if you're waiting till say 9 a.m. to ride, maybe you have time to eat something, but you can keep in a fat adapted state if you're having maybe, the collagen MCT in your coffee or some heavy cream. But my thought is always like, okay, is that causing more stress? If I ate dinner the night before, because Friday nights I might eat later, weeknights I eat like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. and when to move that dinner up. And so if that evening dinner on a Friday is say 6 o'clock, that will give you kind of top off the muscle glycogen stores for the next day. But if you're going for a 3-4 hour ride, not having anything but water, yes, I can do that. But is that causing more stress in my body is what I'm always questioning for my own self. It's like if I'm prone to adrenal dysfunction, having a 4 hour bike ride, because everyone I kind of brags about this in our keto endurance group. It's like, oh yeah, I don't need anything but water and sea salt. But I'm like, is that good for you? Is that causing more stress? Is what I was doing for my own self. Like, oh yeah, I don't need to eat anything, but should I have something halfway? Because that's always a question of, yeah, OMAD or, the long run. Is this harming my hormones? But you don't know unless you test.
You don't know unless you test, exactly. So I think that's what I was going to say is you've got to test and monitor yourself and get that feedback. I'm not sure, like obviously more in-depth functional blood analysis might tell you about your hormone levels and if that's going like downhill, but those are sort of long-term tests that you would have to track over time. But immediately I think it just comes down to how you feel. And then just think about, are you losing, like losing out on any gains or any adaptations by having some fuel before your long training session? And the answer is probably no. You're probably benefiting yourself by fueling your muscles and fueling your body to be able to put in a harder effort during that session. So yeah, it is a bit of a tricky one to gauge how you feel. But it just it made me think of my friend Christy. She's actually doing a study, Christy Storishuk. She's doing a study on, I think, on females only, and on how whether you should do fasted exercise or not, and what the effects are on hormones. Is it causing a stress response or is it not? So that'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, it'd be great if we can test kisspeptin hormone, is what I said in other shows. Like if we could know if that's increased and causing more stress and having related to thyroid dysfunction, because anytime you're going to have adrenal, you're going to have cortisol excess imbalance, high or low. Dysfunction is going to be also thyroid high low. So it's always looking at that and the liver and pancreas. So it's all connected. But I think going back to what you're saying is when we are fat adapted athletes, we get used to being burning fat as our main fuel source, and how important it is to remember we need to have nutritional ketosis days and have a higher intake of carbohydrates, what that might look like to get out of nutritional ketosis. So like using the BioSense I've been testing out, if, to show no ketones is beneficial, to show that you are teaching your body still to remember how to burn carbohydrates, how to metabolize it and get those enzymes to break it down. And maybe looking at that with your glucose monitor, if you have, like you said before, more spikes because you're not efficient. Because I found that like I'll get headaches from certain food, but then after talking to Jay Feldman, I'm like, well, maybe it's looking at why are you getting headaches from that? Maybe you're not able to metabolize carbs if you're too strict on being too low carb, too often, too long. So maybe we need like the 5-6 days nutritional ketosis, 1 day higher carbs. That could be 100, 200 carbs a day. And then Ben Greenfield always talks about like nutritional ketosis during the day, then placing more carbohydrates, again, what quality carbs, not crap, at dinner. So I think it's looking at each client. That's why I do more personalized coaching rather than group, because you can't figure this out because it's not everyone do this. But what do you think about, how to time your carbs so you're not in nutritional ketosis all the time? And then I guess subnote would be female athletes not doing nutritional ketosis luteal phase is interesting studies too.
Yeah, I think just with timing, so are you saying like you must have periods of time when you're when you're not in nutritional ketosis, and when you need to do that?
Yeah, when should we, because you're saying we need metabolic flexibility, and so many people that have been doing this a long time are good at metabolizing fat for fuel, but we're losing that ability to burn carbohydrates as their main fuel. So we're metabolically inflexible. And how do we train our body to be flexible to burn, metabolize both fuels.
Right. I would usually recommend, so just I always say target your carbohydrates around your training intensity. So to become more metabolically flexible, you would want to have a sufficient amount of carbohydrates for those high intensity sessions. So then your body, if you do have carbohydrates and ingest carbohydrates, you'll see it on your continuous glucose monitor. Your blood glucose will go up, and you'll have to use that fuel immediately. You won't be able to use your fat fuel because you have that energy in your blood. So I like to tell athletes to have like that 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrates before your high intensity session. And your body will be able to will learn to burn those carbohydrates a little bit better. And then the only sessions that you're wanting to do, which are fat fueled, are the lower intensity zone 1, zone 2, right? So just being cognizant and aware of fueling with the carbohydrates, even though, I mean, just for myself, I've been low carb for very long. It's difficult to get yourself to eat those amounts of carbohydrates if you are training 5-6 days a week, to have that before every single session. So it's something that it's a chore. You have to eat certain foods for certain sessions, and be quite cognizant of that. And then on the female athlete side, I don't work with a lot of young females, but I would definitely the earlier luteal phase, the not doing the fasting in that phase is definitely something that I've seen based on the research. But again, my experience with that with myself is I haven't noticed it too much, so I wouldn't be able to say. Yeah,
That's why I just keep listening to Dr. Mindy Pelz and her fasting. She did it. Her book comes out end of the year 2022. Fasting like a girl. That's what it's called. Her new book, Fasting Like a Girl. And then she had another one on premenopause, menopausal women, and just trying to target that. But what I'm trying to map everything out and then adapt it to the female athlete and look at Dr. Stacy Sims, who isn't a fan of fasted workouts and that we're not eating enough for female athletes. So we do need to eat before workouts, and really prioritizing protein post workout, like a whey protein or beef protein, if you can't do whey, that has a higher amount of leucine in that essential amino acid blend, and timing that. But just what type of carbs to have beforehand and when, depending, like when Stacey Sims speaks in her books, I just finished her other one, it was more the high intensity workouts like you're talking about. Like that's where we need to place something probably beforehand. But what does that look like? And, her examples are like whole grain toast with this or that, or oatmeal. Like I can't do gluten or wheat. And, a lot of people can't do grains. And so give an example, like have, like Vespa, or having the S fuels is a slow release. So figure out what to take, I think it's a challenge because people have gotten fearful of carbohydrates, and clarifying what are carbs. I keep trying to do on the show, and I'm doing in a new presentation I'll make for the podcast of, all right, if I'm supposed to have carbs pre high intensity workout or a longer workout, have those 20 grams, what does that even look like? So I don't think people know because it's not I don't want a bagel, a muffin. Yeah. I'm not going to have a bag of chips. People, the crappy carbs versus it's like clean keto versus dirty keto. Eat real food, nutrient dense, it balances your blood sugar. So what are your favorite sources of clean nature's carbohydrates? You mentioned honey, a banana. What are some things?
Like you said, definitely like whole food sources firstly. And there's quite a few that can give us a very quick burst of energy. So a large banana would be about 32 grams of carbohydrates. That's quite a lot of carbohydrates. So you could even have a small banana or a half of a large banana, and that would be enough to fuel you for your training session. Dates are incredible as well. Lots of carbohydrates in those, and honey as well. So I sometimes like, if I'm doing a high intensity session, I think your muscles are definitely working as well, and you are like increasing, you're causing muscle adaptation and muscle protein synthesis. So I sometimes do have a protein shake before as well. So, and I'll mix that with a banana. So that's something that's easily digestible. It's quick and easy to make. So I'll have a scoop or 2 scoops of protein, and half a banana and maybe a little bit of honey. And at least I know I've got my like full set of amino acids on board, and I've got the right amount of carbohydrates as well. So yeah, someone like following an autoimmune paleo diet might not be able to have the oats or the rice cracker with almond butter and that sort of thing. So I think that's where it's quite limited, but bananas, dates might be okay, and honey. But if you're pretty happy to eat anything, I think oats are also a great ideal. A lot of people can metabolize those quite easily in the morning. So yeah, it's something like that. And I think protein is super important. It doesn't have to be directly after your training session. It can be had before or in your meals in and around that. But so that the anabolic window isn't that important. It's just important that you are getting that right amount of protein in throughout the day. So are you reaching your 1.6 grams per kilogram body weight or whatever it is?
Yeah, that's why I was here. And then Stacey Sims says in her book, like women need it 30 minutes afterwards to have their protein, and the men can wait, 3 hours. So it's like, wait, I thought the 30-minute post-workout window is a myth. And now you hear all different things. So it's like, listen, I kind of just listen to my body when I feel like I'm ready to eat. Cause I think after workout, you just don't want anything in your sympathetic mode, and to get your body to digest food properly. If it's liquid, it's a little easier to digest, obviously. So shake is something I would go to, or a bone broth cup with some coconut or ghee in it. But, having something, timing it when that will refuel my muscle glycogen storage tanks is always, I think, an experiment to see how that will help the next workout.
Yeah, if you come out from an overnight fast and you've done your morning session, I think it's more important to have it quite soon after your training session, your meal or your protein shake or whatever it might be. But if you are training in the afternoon and you've had some meals in throughout the day, then I think it's just eat when you are ready to eat after that.
Yeah, and that's another point that I know Ben Greenfield a few years ago did this podcast he has on his page that he did for Dr. Pompa, Live It to Lead It seminar on when to do fasted exercise. And it is when to eat after your workout if you're doing another workout within 8 hours. So I was like, that tip, it's like, all right, I work out because if I do something in the morning at 5:30, go to the gym, if it's a run or a bike, but I do master swimming at noon, I need to make sure I figure out timing when to eat there, not just, even now I haven't eaten enough and I can feel it, but you have to figure out when to eat or take some ketone shots to have something in between when you're working. But I think it is knowing that you do need to eat something if you're going to do a 2-day workout, and have some carbs in there. If it's like you're saying, a quarter banana frozen in a shake with some almond butter is really good, or having some berries. But I think it's going back to what I said earlier, I think we have such a fear, and myself, I had this too, like, oh, I can't have banana, it'll spike my glucose up, or I can't have berries, I'm going to get a headache. And matching those with some fat and some protein, it does better. But I think we've gotten so one-sided. It's like, oh, I got to be strict keto carnivore and all carbohydrates are bad for me, that we're all or nothing. It's like always swinging.
I think with women, I suggest, so waking up in the morning, we often like to extend our fast, but if you are that endurance athlete and you're needing to fuel a bit more, I say have the protein in the first thing in the morning. So at least your first couple of meals should be high protein, higher fat, and then you can introduce your carbohydrates later in the afternoon and the evening meals.
Yeah.
And those can come from starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes or pumpkin or butternut, those sorts of things. And you'll be able to use your glycogen stores for the next morning as well. So, and I think if there is a massive stress response that comes with fasting overnight, then I think it will be combated with having that protein and fat meal in the morning. but it will be interesting to see what the study's results say.
Yeah. And I think it is that N=1 study as well as studies are out there, because I think doing a female athlete, it'd be interesting how they conduct the study, because it's hard to get everyone on the same day one menstrual cycle. So you have to really have a lot of things going on to figure out who's where. But, finishing up on the female athlete, I think looking at estrogen building foods during, ovulation time, and then progesterone building foods and how that looks like. And, how they say basically non-athletes keeping around 50 grams of carbohydrates, but athletes can go 100 grams to, Ben will say up to 300 grams, and Dan Plew says 100, 130 grams a day of carbs. But I think it's so individualized, because even what Dr. Dan Plew recommends, that works for him and is just kind of a guideline starting point. But then we kind of do what's course correct and find your sweet spot. But that will change all the time based on your workout schedule that week, and females what the hormone cycle is. So I think everyone has to really not be so set in stone day after day, because it's going to fluctuate and change, and listen to your body.
I mean, there's we all know there's inter-individual variability, how we all differ from one another. So that's just one thing on its own. But there's also intra-individual variability. So how we differ from day to day, depending on our training, depending on our stress load. And I keep talking about the CGM, but it's quite impressive and profound to see how your body responds differently throughout the day. And if you can just track these sorts of metric, at least you do it once in your, maybe once a year or once every 2 years, and you get a kind of ballpark idea of how your body is responding to certain foods. Maybe the banana is not the best thing for you, or the bowl of oats. Maybe you want to have sweet potato or something like that. So yeah, I think it's really important to get this sort of data. And what's quite exciting is just the health technology and the tools that we have available to us are advancing so rapidly, and biosensors and all these sorts of things are enabling us to track all of this information a lot easier, and it's becoming more accessible to us. So I think in the next couple of years, being able to have a CGM or something similar that's going to be able to help us track these metrics will be a lot easier.
Yeah. And for sure, I'll try to remember, put Ulta Labs or Direct Labs in the show notes, because you can get your own blood chemistry. Because I know it's a constant battle to get your doctor to cover all the comprehensive blood markers to find out your glucose, your insulin, A1C, and all your inflammatory markers. Insurance doesn't cover, so doctors aren't doing it unless you already are diabetic. This is what I just discovered. Like, you want to wait until I'm diabetic to know if my insulin resistance. So you want to be preventative. You have to take your health in your own hands. I looked it up. It costs $25 to do your insulin on Ulta Labs. So I'll try to find that comprehensive lift. You can get all these markers for $300 something and get your reverse T3 and all these markers in there. And I think they're so essential to get the full blood chemistry. And ideally, a Dutch test is your dried urine test to find out your hormones throughout a 24-hour period of time. And of course, a GI map or Genova Diagnostics 3-day stool test to really look at what's going on your microbiome, because that interferes with your metabolism and your cravings too, and what you're looking at, a lot more data there. So it's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So last couple of minutes, I didn't leave enough time because I got on my rant, but Tailor Blend, talk about what your company is you're working for now and how we can learn more.
Yeah, it's personalized nutritional supplements essentially, and we have an online product builder. So it's an online platform where you can basically go and make your own supplement online. So it's quite fun. Is a shake version or a drink, and you can choose either one of those, and to that you can add your individual ingredients. So what's quite popular and we're doing a lot of now is nutrigenomics based blends. So people getting their DNA tested, and depending on your genetic SNPs or your variations, we can identify which nutrients will have the most positive impact on your health. So you can make a blend that's completely unique to you, and not just unique in terms of its ingredients, also dosages. So you might need more vitamin D compared to someone else. And Yeah, so that's very exciting. And then obviously things like microbiome and other functional blood analysis results we're looking to integrate in the future. So you can seamlessly kind of get your personalized blend based on your health information. But at the moment, the genetic DNA results are quite popular to use at the moment. But yeah, that's what we're doing. We have exciting plans to be launching in the US, and that's our big project at the moment.
When's the estimated launch date in the US?
No estimated launch date at the moment. We in rounds of funding, and once that's secure, then we'll have a date. Yeah.
Now you're saying is the athletic greens, is it like athletic greens you said, but a
No,
shake or
I mentioned it's just quite interesting to see the trend from supplements becoming your pill that you take in
liquid?
the morning. Yeah, and something that's like a fixed dosage, and it's got one ingredient, and you take your vitamins in the morning, but it's becoming more functional. So people are having their nutrients and their supplements in their like more integrated into their daily life. So whether that's your protein shake in the morning, or I mean, you even get crazy things like anti-inflammatory chocolate bars or whatever it
Yeah.
might be, just adding those functional ingredients into your daily routine. And I think that's what athletics greens is so great, is because it's something that tastes good, it's got everything you need in it, and it's taken once a day, and it's more enjoyable to take. So it's more enjoyable
Yeah.
than taking a pill. It's actually it tastes good, and it's like a process of taking something. So we're seeing that with our blends as well, our shakes especially, is people enjoy having all of their nutrients in one, and it also gives you the ability to add your macronutrients, so your proteins,
Wow.
your carbs and your fats, so
Oh,
which
that's
which
cool.
you can't do with pills,
Yeah.
which
That
is
sounds
great. Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, I always had athletic greens when it first started, and we have like 3 bags in the cupboard. But I got a Vibrant Wellness wheat zoomer last year, and I cannot do wheat and wheat
No.
grass. You can't do wheat grass. You can't do athletic greens. So that's why Paleo Valley greens have no wheat in them. So they're a good backup option. But just so now we have a lot of athletic greens because I stopped eating it last year, and we just get a monthly shipment. So just beware if you're not good with wheat. Wheatgrass is wheat.
Right.
So put that in there. But that's so
Yeah.
exciting. I can't wait to see what that looks like.
Yeah, sure. I would love to be able to ship you a supplement. But maybe just check out our website, play around, and see what you like to make, and we can
Yeah.
get it and to get you something.
That's exciting. I love that because I'm all about getting off supplement pills and just be able to drink it and eat real food sources. And that's ideal because no one likes taking pills, anyways. And if you end up having like 15 different bottles of stuff, if we can just throw it all in a shake, that's like my dream. So that's good. Good
Right.
idea. So great. When where any links we want to share, we'll put it all in the show notes, but where people can find you and learn more about your
Thank you. Great. Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Coastplan, and our company is Tailor Blend, also on Instagram. And yeah, you can check out our website as well. And if you
great.
have any questions, then pop me a message.
Super. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing the conversation about metabolic efficiency, metabolic flexibility, and carb timing for endurance athletes. So I appreciate your thoughts and expertise in your research you've been doing.
Thanks, Debbie. I appreciate you as well. And thanks for, I really enjoy listening to your podcast on my long drives.
Thank you. It's fun to do.